Next up, we have a discussion producing with AI today. We're lucky to have Joanna Popper to lead the discussion. Joanna was an executive producer of Masters of Light and Project 2029, so please join me in welcoming Joanna Popper to the stage.
This morning, we heard from Gaith and we heard from Lori about what's shifted in AI since last year. And since last year's Produced By conference. They covered copyright, they covered model training, they covered how to think about your contracts in the future and the inclusion of AI in the contracts. And so our next panel has a group that has worked across all aspects of entertainment. We have people up here with Emmy Awards, with Peabody Awards, with Golden Globe Awards, we have more than one person up here who has Oscar nominations. We have people who started YouTube's creator program, who sold their company for almost $1 billion, pretty impressive. And so we have people with all sorts of experience that are gonna talk to us. And not only do they have experience in all the entertainment industry that's been, but these are the people that are leading the charge, that are charting the path on our entertainment industry relationship with AI. And so I'm so excited to talk to them about what they're building, what they're creating, how they see the future, and what they're making. So we're gonna start off with Andrew Morrison. So excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So you and your film, and we have Brady in the audience as well, excited that he's here as well. So The Brutalist was such a beautiful film and so impactful and so meaningful for so many reasons. And one of the things that got a ton of press and a ton of conversation was the choice of using some aspects of AI technology together with Adrian Brody's great acting to have his voice sound more Hungarian. I'd love to start off by talking a bit about your artistic choice, the creative choice, and then working together with the team and how you made that happen, and why those are the choices that were the best creative outcome for the film.
Yeah, so we worked with a company called Respeecher, who's based in Ukraine, and the main goal was to make the film perfect. We hit a wall where how do you make it was really only related to the Hungarian language itself. How could we make the accent within Hungarian? It's a very challenging language. We shot in Hungary. We spent a lot of time with Hungarians. Really, it's almost impossible. We had Adrian work with a dialect coach for a year. We had, he got really amazingly good. And we wanted it to be perfect because when you watch period films, people perfect, costumes and design and all these things. But then you'll watch it and like, oh wait, that dialect, it just doesn't feel like totally 100% right. And so we looked for every kind of solution we could find in the world, and this company had developed it's sort of like synthetic voice models where you could take a performance and it's their entire performance. It's not, it's not theirs, and then you can kind of, merge that with an actual Hungarian speaker to kind of synthesize those two things. And even that wasn't enough. I mean, we, took elements of that and did dialogue editing at a vowel and consonant level to kind of merge and create even more precisely synthetic things that were, really 100% his performance. But the goal was perfection. And I think as we found tools that allowed that to be possible, that was exciting and that was new. So, and it cost us way more than doing it the other way. It cost us way more time. Like it was not in any way like
efficiency play.
No, it was not an efficiency play at all. I mean, it took, we had to hire a lot more people to do it. But the intent, and I think the resulting product, made sense. And what was the other half of that? Was there? No.
That was the main part, but awesome, thank you. I think what's super interesting about that is it shows that there's so much talk around the technology potentially negatively impacting either the creativity or the quality or even just the numbers of people that are involved. And in the experience you had an amazing actor. You had a dialect coach who worked over a year, and you had other people that were part of it, and you had the company. So it really almost expanded the numbers of people involved with the pursuit of having that ultimate perfect creative product.
Yeah, I think that I guess there's an alternate where people are using these things, and maybe we'll talk about this to save time, save money, save. I think at this stage, the goal was, something that wasn't achievable with any other technology.
Right.
If there was another technology, we might have used that. And so I think with that as the guiding light of like, how do you push what can be done cinematically forward to the edges of where it can be, that was the goal.
And obviously working fully collaboratively with the actor.
Yeah, I mean, the way he was across all of it. It was entirely his performance. When we built this voice model, he then totally owned that. So like, we really thought through all the implications and the ethics around like, if you're creating something out of your own work, how do you get to still own that work? It's not like they went and trained another model off this. Like, it's his. And so we spent months and months thinking about that and trying to work through the ethics and the all the implications of it, because we wanted it to be done respectfully, artistically, thoughtfully.
Great. All right. Thank you. We'll talk a bit more about some other aspects of it and circle back on that. So Barbara, you've worked at the forefront of VFX and technology throughout your whole career. You've been consulting to some of the biggest studios in the city on AI, and you just recently worked on your own short film created with AI. So talk to us a little bit about that process and what made you want to do it, and what did you learn along the way?
Sure.
And I know we're going to show a clip, but if you want to show the
It
clip
sort of
or something.
started at the time. A couple of things came about in 2022, which I know was brought up a couple of times today. I was running a virtual production company, and the strikes happened. So I found that I had a lot of free time, and so I decided to do a little writing and start to develop a project. And a producer I had collaborated before, Elise Katz, she's here, and I were talking about how far we could possibly take it. At the same time, I was seeing, I think it was first Runway that had been released, and a couple other AI tools were starting to appear, and so I started to fool around with them, and it got me thinking, like, I wonder how far I could go with this, with as little to no money as possible. How much could I? Because the story I'd come up with takes place in environments that I would probably not be able to practically shoot quite a bit of, and it required a lot of set building that I would never have the budget for. So initially it was to kind of ideate about what it would look like and how I could go about possibly creating pieces of it. And then as the tools kept, daily new things were coming out, I started to realize I could get pretty far. So we went quickly from shifting to, from a sort of a development project into let's just figure out if we can shoot this and make it.
We're gonna run a clip of Unhoused.
So your daughter's been scouring the neighborhood for you, right?
Damn it. People call me Doc,
What kind of doc?
a head doctor.
A seagull, messenger from the ocean god.
So he's mental. Don't be throwing shade on mentals. Ain't we all, babe?
I don't care what the fuck you do, but just don't come back.
You don't sound like a homeless dude.
Well, I am.
There's not a shred of humanity left in this world. These tech assholes are pushing everyone out.
I'm not worried about the bras.
Shouldn't be selling drugs.
Hey, man.
You the chick with the spice pops?
Recently, I find myself unhoused.
Home is a social construct. I've never had anything I'd call home.
Very excited to see it.
Like every early trailer, there's a few unfinished shots in there.
Well, thank you for sharing it here. It was great. So, Bryn, you've been on the forefront of quite a few of the shifts in technology, from virtual reality and then now Moon Valley and ASTERIA. What brought you into working in this format now, and what's driving you here?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for having us up here. I think it's really exciting to talk to this room. I've been making films for a long time, producing films. Riot was doing virtual and augmented reality. Then I moved on to spending a lot of time in documentary. We had built this like AI tool probably 4 years ago for our development team to help them see stories that were trending and then compare them to what the studios were like looking for. And it was like one of those experiences where we spent a lot of money on it. It's been like $500,000 and it took 6 months. And then when ChatGPT came out, it was like, I could have done it, you know, like in a day or something. And so I think I learned like, wow, this is coming fast. And so from there, we decided to try to build a studio, I think, in a way that is good for our industry. Like not hiding from the issues, but trying to look face on at them. So we have a studio, which is like a creative team, and then we have a technology team building models.
Great. All right, and we're going to show a video as well.
They said it couldn't be done. But impossibility is just a moment before inevitability. Now, ghosts live inside our machines. The laws of nature do not resist, only wait to be understood. Impossibility is not a wall, only a choice unmade. The future remains an uncharted course. It is for us to decide where to go.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. George, you started your career at YouTube, the very beginning of the creator world, and then went on to found full screen, and now have jumped full force into this. What's driven you here? And you and I spoke previously, hearing your origin story into this industry, I think was really interesting. So I'd love you to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I was fortunate to really start my career at the earliest days of YouTube, and had a chance to build what's known as the YouTube Partner Program, which is how people make money on YouTube. And believe it or not, in the earliest days of YouTube, that wasn't the focus of YouTube. It was like, how do we get studio shows and network shows on YouTube? And me and a gentleman named Jamie Bryn were like, well, this is the democratization of distribution we're talking about here. Like, these creators, they're building audiences. We want them to stay. And so we want them to have a way to make a living. So we got to stand that up, and I ran that program for about 6 years. As an amazing experience. And through that, left YouTube and started a company called Fullscreen, which was a network of these artists, of these creators who were building homes on YouTube and social media. That company was acquired by AT&T and made part of Warner. And I was like kind of retired after that, and started a family, was surfing a lot and angel investing. And in July of 2022, Midjourney came out, which is a generative AI image creator, which was made available on basically a chat platform called Discord. It was the worst user experience ever, but you could talk to the computer. Yes.
Those channels.
Yeah, but you could, for the first time in my life, you could talk to the computer in normal language, and you could tell it what you wanted, and sometimes you would get what you wanted, and sometimes you would get not what you wanted, and sometimes you would get something unexpected, which is better than what you even wanted. And so that was really exciting for me, and so I started to just tinker a lot and spend a bunch of time. And then shortly after that, DALL-E 2 came out, which was OpenAI's image generator. And I was like, okay, this is going to be the next chapter in my career. And so I did what I like to do, which is I started meeting artists and who were the people that were using these tools and using them much better than me, by the way. And I spent about 1.5 to 2 years advising them and just trying to understand what it is they were doing, what they were excited about. And, you know, a lot of them were doing tests and sharing them on social media and that kind of thing. And that's a world I know really well. And I'm like, these guys, they're not building audiences to become social media influencers. They want to be Chris Nolan or Tarantino or Scorsese. You know, they have stories to tell. And many of them are, you know, working commercial directors, making music videos or maybe, you know, commercial work or editors in Hollywood. And for whatever reason, typically haven't made it with their own narrative storytelling. And so they've turned to these new generative AI tools as a way to bring their ideas to life. And so one of the people I met in that process is a gentleman named Dave Clark. And Dave had said to me in one of our catch-up calls, he said, say, George, you're kind of like an angel investor, right? And by this point, I'd gotten to know him pretty well. He's like, I got this script for this movie. He's like, do you want to invest in that? And I said, no. And I said, but I'll tell you what I will do. I'll start a company with you. And we'll make movies like that in the way that you and your peers are pioneering. And for him, that was really exciting. And we joined forces. And then I was able to recruit a third co-founder, which was a colleague I'd met at the earliest stage of YouTube, a man named Jamie Bryn. So Dave, Jamie, and I started Promise. And the idea of Promise is pretty straightforward. We want to make high-end, long-form, premium film, television, animation, and explore new formats. Building a studio and the infrastructure around a studio from the ground up around these new tools. And so we're doing that and having a lot of fun in the process.
Excellent. And we have a video for you as well. Excellent. Thank you.
At Promise, we're pioneering a new era of filmmaking, blending human creativity with cutting-edge AI technology to craft cinematic experiences like never before. I'm Dave Clark, co-founder and chief creative officer at Promise. Creating cinematic stories with true artistic quality requires a team of artists, people with bold imagination, a clear creative vision, and a deep love for the craft of filmmaking. Our latest project, Ninja Punk, is set in the neon-lit streets of Los Angeles in 2065. The story follows a cybernetic ninja on a path of vengeance after his wife's murder, only to uncover a hidden underworld where ancient powers collide with futuristic warfare. After the script is complete, we use generative AI to world build and explore our characters. Live-action performances are captured alongside Hollywood's elite stunt teams and actors. But that's just the beginning. Let's hear from Rob.
Filmmaking is always about bringing the best to the forefront. As filmmakers, we're using all the tools in the tool chest to move the story forward. As an AI-native studio, we're looking to the future of filmmaking and how we can utilize this technology to help us tell stories in the best way possible. We're blending photography from our lead actors and motion capture from our stunt performers with VFX and generative AI material. Many of these techniques are well established, but when we add Gen AI, it allows us to ideate and iterate rapidly. We're still using people for every step, and everything is guided by human creativity.
This isn't plug-and-play filmmaking. It's a dance between art and technology. At Promise, we're not replacing tradition, we're expanding it, using AI to enhance storytelling, captivate audiences, and open bold new frontiers in cinema.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Okay. That was great. Thanks everyone for sharing those. So Bryn, let's you recently made an announcement about a new film that you're working on with Natasha Lyon and Jaron Lanier, one of the legends of virtual reality, who actually coined the term virtual reality. So talk to us a little bit about that process. What does that look like? How are you involving AI in it? Where is it hybrid?
Yeah, I think
and how it came about as well.
Sure. I think there's like two things that are exciting, and George was touching on some of them. I mean, one is allowing filmmakers to do a lot more with a lot less, which is about time, but it's also can be about money. And so what you're able to do on an indie film, by bringing the cost down or by being able to do the VFX quicker means that you can have filmmakers who might not be able to make their films at a large budget be able to do them for less. So Natasha Lyonne, Britt Marling had this movie they wanted to do that I think at a studio would be like 40 million or 50 million. And we came together to kind of figure out how we could do it for under 20. And so it's not nothing, it's not zero, but it means that for a film, it's like a sci-fi kind of Matrix type movie that should be made and needs to be seen and is going to be incredibly exciting. And their voices are so important, but it makes it fundable, I think, at that a level where it wouldn't be at 40 or 50.
Mm-hmm. And then can you talk a little bit about what does it actually mean in terms of the workflows?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of it is in development, is in, like George was saying, like how quickly you can ideate, how fast you can get to yeses or nos, how you can fail faster in some ways. And then half the movie, it's hybrid, so half of it's live action, the other half is in this video game world. So in that world, we're still having our actors drive the performances. We're still shooting a lot, but we're using the AI to render much faster, generate backgrounds. One of the things that we do at ASTERIA and Moon Valley is that we've developed our own AI model, like a visual intelligence model. And the distinction of that model being that it's trained only on footage that we've paid to license. So it's like the only enterprise grade AI model that really we can show the chain of title and show the ownership and have indemnification on where the data that came in to train it, which means that it's like a more legal and ethical in some ways solution for studios and filmmakers. So we train new models on top of that model for each film and television project that we're doing. Those are called LoRa training or fine tuning. And then that gives us parameters for the film that we're working on in the case of Natasha's film, Uncanny Valley. So the model knows exactly what that world looks like, the world that she has in her mind that she's envisioning. And so once you know that, then it's like you can be generating backgrounds, you can be generating background characters much faster than you would be able to otherwise.
And Barbara, you've been working with some of the bigger Hollywood studios on figuring out where does this fit into the existing pipelines and how do the workflows look? Can you talk to us a bit about that process? What are you seeing from the studio side?
Yeah, definitely. Even while I was making Unhoused, I always have that lens because I come from a large studio background experience, and much of my career has been about figuring out how to go from here to there, and there being just shy of impossible. So I kind of, every step of it was like, where is this going to impact the way that we think about these things now? What does this look like in a pipeline? What does this look like in a traditional studio development workflow, and then handoff to principal, to editorial, to post-production, visual effects, and all those sorts of things? And where are they going to be comfortable, and where is it not going to be comfortable too? So a lot of what I end up talking about is not just the technology itself or where things are, where I think, speculating on where I think they might go. But, to Bryn's point, it's like, what are these models? What are, what is the source of them? What are the ethics, or what is the case law around it? And how do we think about governance as an industry going about it? And so, it's a combination of those. Creatively, what can we do? The thing that I realized, and I think we're probably all going down this path, is initially I had this sort of point of view that I was going to go in, and it was a one-for-one transaction. Like, here's something that would be really expensive to do if I were to try and build a 3D environment, or if I would try to do this compositing shot. So let me see if I can do this using AI tools instead. But the longer I played in there, in sort of a sandbox sort of way, the more I realized, like, it's a dance. It's this sort of, you have this relation, it's a collaboration, and in the end you wind up, it changed, for me anyway, it changed the way I thought about development as much as the way I thought about production. And so that's another thing I kind of lean into, is how we find white space for anyone to think about moving, because I do think it's fundamentally, we're making a big shift, and not just incrementally.
George, we talked a bit about you all are now working with Curious Refuge, to the conversation around making a big shift and helping people come along that shift with us. So talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Curious Refuge, what's happening there, and how you're working to sort of upskill in some ways.
Yeah, well, part of our original strategy with Promise was to bring together the bleeding edge generative AI filmmakers. And this is a new class of talent. They have a new type of skill. And, you know, in order to do the best work, we want the best of the best talent. And we quickly found out that there's not that many of them out there. There's a lot of people logging into tools, trying stuff, tinkering, and that's amazing. But we're interested in the obsessives, the people who you know, stay up till 3 a.m. using these tools in ways they weren't meant to be used.
I live with one of them. Yeah.
That's right. And they, you know, they tinker and they get early access to the models and they share stuff on the Discords and the chats, and they, to them, this is their way forward. They've committed to, this is the way I'm going to make art moving forward. And so we like those people. But the people that fit that, this is like the 1% of the 1%, right? And there's not that many of them. There will be more over time. And so people need to learn these new skills. And so we always had from day one this idea that we would have kind of a school inside of Promise to help people upskill and learn the latest. And you have to constantly learn, so it's not just a one and done. And my co-founder, Dave, said, well, have you checked out Curious Refuge? I'm a guest instructor over there. It's like it's an AI film school. I'm like, there's an AI film school? Come on, dude. And he's like, yeah. So I started looking into Curious Refuge, which is an incredible LA-based company, teaching now well over 10,000 students who for the most part come from the Hollywood community. But also, I should say they're global as well. We're in over 170 countries. And people are learning everything from AI image training, AI filmmaking, advanced AI filmmaking, AI animation, AI VFX, AI documentary making. And in a kind of cohort-based online film school model where you're getting peer feedback and instructor feedback and making projects. And it's this incredible business. So we acquired it in Q1 of this year. And so that is our upskilling division, if you will, serving Promise to help make sure we have great talent always, but also serving the broader entertainment industry at large. We have, you know, relationships with most of the major studios, major ad agencies, and producers, directors, writers, editors. So it's been this really incredible thing, and it's a great husband and wife team.
They just had a baby.
Had a baby yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
Yeah. And I do want to say something, by the way. I think there's a lot of fear and trepidation in this space, which I understand. I think one of the best ways to break barriers and demystify that fear is to learn, and then you can make up your mind.
So on the, you know, the subject of some of the I think you said the fear and trepidation, you know, the way that I always think about it is around these tools, around any of the shifts that have happened, is it's optional to use the tools, but it is imperative or critical to learn about them so that when there's choices, you're making those choices in the most informed ways. So that brings us to you, Andrew. And so one of the things I found really interesting was that a bit of your experience around working with Respeecher, who is a company that sits in the Ukraine that is currently going through a wartime experience, was a bit you know, similar to what you were portraying on screen with with what the topic of your movie was. You know, somebody who was avant-garde and breaking new ground in a creative field and coming up against some friction for further work. So let's talk a little bit about that, how some of the work that you were doing off-screen paralleled what you were creating on-screen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely think, you know, I don't know, we made a movie about someone trying to push the boundaries of artistic expression in a specific historic period, and being met with, you know, anger and confusion and, you know, disapproval. And it was interesting to be, you know, campaigning that movie and experiencing the same thing for doing something sort of at the boundary of where I think people, you know, want people to be making stuff or what feels acceptable. And I think, you know, I think that's always the case when you're doing things that are new. The first reaction is confusion or fear or or really misunderstanding, you know, because I think like very few people wanted to engage with like the real granular conversation about how these tools actually work, what you might be able to do with them, what the implications of those things are. And it's all, you know, unknown territory. And it was interesting, you know, Respeecher themselves, you know, you know, they were based, when we would Zoom with them, like they were in the middle of a war and just trying to find the space to build a company, to, you know, build tools. You know, they all think of themselves and, you know, and are like artists, and to be in a world where that was not, you know, it was really vilified, was, I think, a really like disorienting experience, because people could love things for one reason and then turn around and you know, cast them aside. But
yeah, thank you. So Bryn, let's talk about this a bit more. I mean, you touched on it lightly, but you know, let's talk about. You know, there's lots of different groups taking lots of different approaches and using different words to talk about what their approach is as well. I think, you know, a lot of the language around what is clean, what's ethical, what's copyright compliant. There's lots of different terms. So, coming from where you come from and the background you have, what made you think that this was, you know, the approach that you have is what's so important, and coming together the two companies that you're working with?
I think it's like what's interesting about this panel is that we all kind of had a similar journey of the moment that we realized this was going to be transformative. You know, like for me, it was seeing Midjourney and being like, well, if you can generate images, then you can make La Jetée, and if you can make La Jetée, then you can make a movie. You know, it was like, I was like, wow, like this is going to happen. And then I saw the like Snapchat face filter of like a Pixar, where you could become a Pixar character, and it was like kind of going viral. I don't know if people remember that. But then I was like, has anybody at Pixar seen this who's building the workflows? Like, is it interesting? Like, is it not interesting? Like, could it be interesting? And I just thought that these technologies were like missing context, and they weren't being built by our industry. And they were kind of being pushed on us. And then I also spent a year like meeting every AI company, and then meeting all of our network here, like all my friends, mentors in the industry. I like called everybody to take them to lunch to be like, what do you think of AI? What's wrong with it? What's interesting? What's exciting? And learned a lot. Like the biggest thing I would say a year and a half ago when I was meeting with these AI companies was when I would go in and see behind the scenes, it was like, oh my God, it's going to change everything. Like, and our industry isn't prepared for, I think, what's coming in terms of like what this technology is. So that was one thing of seeing like how seismic it was. The second was, it was obvious that they didn't know how to make movies and weren't building tools for filmmakers. And maybe worse is that they didn't care about our industry, and especially 2022 around this time, it was hard time, still a hard time. So this idea of kind of like building these tools from Silicon Valley that come in to solve all the problems to an industry that's already hurting is like offensive pretty much. And you could see that in the industry that was happening. So I think also it was about thinking about how the times in our industry where technology has come in and changed everything before, right? Where it's like whatever color or sound or CGI or computer animation, and seeing a similar pattern that happens from a resistance to an inevitability, to even companies that are born in those times, like the Imagineers or ILM or Pixar, where a group of these people who are figuring them out come from bunch of different disciplines into one room and try to solve a collective problem. And so that was inspiring for me to think about, well, like, why don't I try to find those people too, bring them together, not to have them like be like, okay, now what movie do you want to make and you want to make, but rather like, what would happen if you brought all these people who are solving all these little things on Discord all over the world and put them in one room, and then had them work with the best filmmakers in the world and put them in there, and then said like, okay, well, what movie do you want to make with these guys? And so that's kind of what our approach has been. And I think in my conversations with, on the Hollywood side, time and time again, it was like, well, AI is coming, but somebody's got to figure out this copyright thing. And because, you know, if you just look at what the resistance is, there's real problems in AI, right? There's like a copyright of like the models have been trained on all of our stuff, right? And so, and that has not been resolved, and it's coming. You know, there's deep fakes, there's job disruptions, all those things. And so like, how do you think about trying to build something if you know that it's fundamentally transformational and you know it's inevitable? then how do you try to build those systems where it's good for us? And we also try to understand what are the things that are like really bad that we need to kind of collectively stand up against, and what are the things that actually we might lean into. And I think what's changed in the last 2 years is that more and more of all of us, I think, have had more time to play around with ChatGPT or whatever in our own lives and say like, okay, it's actually helpful for X, like making a deck or whatever. And so there's less resistance as there was before. But I think for us on the copyright, as we came together with this company, Moon Valley, they were a bunch of guys leaving DeepMind. They wanted to build a new visual intelligence model, like a gen video model from the ground up. And when we met them, and it was really Natasha who was pushing on this at the beginning, was like, before you start training it, can you figure out how to train it only on data that we have paid to license? And to their credit, they figured it out. They spent the last 8 months training the model. It's now out in alpha. It'll be available to the public in the end of this month, in July. And yeah, I think it was really important because you had, I think, a similar thing happening at all the studios, which was like the heads of the studios or the shareholders or the investors, whatever, saying like, we better figure out what our AI strategy is because it's going to change everything. And then the department heads kind of like spending months and months learning it, sometimes with probably your help in there, and people coming to the end and going like, oh, actually, I could see how it could be helpful in 4 or 5 of these places. And then it getting to legal, and legal saying, well, maybe you can use it in development, but not for final pixel. So I think we believe that if you can build a model that's as good as the other ones, it'll do 2 things. One is it'll challenge the big tech companies, Google and Microsoft, OpenAI, to say, well, if we figured out how to do a model that's trained ethically, then how come you can't do it? Because I think there's a story that's been told that says that these models need to take all of our movies and scripts so that we can like win an AI war against China. It's like it's not a fair thing to say to us like, well, let us just train on your library. And so I think that we're quite excited about when our model comes out, and we hope that it's as good or better than the other models, that we challenge this narrative that there is no other way to do it. Because if they let that happen, then we'll see what'll happen to the music industry will happen to us here too. Barbara?
Yeah, you brought up so many thoughts for me, but one of the things that I always like to remind myself of is that this isn't our industry. AI is bigger than all of us, and we're tapping into it. And so I think we need to come together as a community to have a point of view on that. And when I first heard about Moon Valley and this notion of an ethical model, we showed up. I was with Disney at the time, and we showed up to understand a little bit more about that. It was the recognition that we don't know what the definition of ethical is. Right, and so we have to come together to understand, like, what does that mean? Like, does the MPA or TPN certify it? Do we have, what is the industry going to define as ethical? But I think what I love, actually all 3 of you are hitting on things that I think are necessary. Because you're doing them, there's conversations happening that are going to get us there, that are going to get us further. The ethical conversation, with the Brutalist, bringing the artist into the discussion. Yes, we used it, and we had the artist involved, and the artist was in support of it from the beginning. And I think training, the upskilling, because it is scary to people, right? And so, what I don't want to happen is that people are making a choice of should they or shouldn't they. It should be, definitely understand it and then make a decision if you're going to use it, but don't just avoid it completely because it's not going away. The one other thing I want to say about the big companies and the fact that that these tools came from outside of our industry is that they're terrible for artists. Like, for the most part, you use these models. You use Midjourney on Discord, or you try to use Comfy UI in your series of models. I can give you 50 examples. They're really not designed for people who create long-form stories, right? And so there's work to do, and I know that probably everyone here is doing some amount of work towards that effort. But the more that there's training and people using it and great stories being told with the tools, the better they're going to get for everyone.
Yeah, I think we talked and thought so much about like the Pixar story and the Render Man story, which was like, like when it was just the computer scientists making computer animation in the early days, it was terrible. And then they built Render Man, which is like essentially like the first interface between an artist and a computer. And then you see the difference, like just go on YouTube and see the difference in those. It's like night and day. And I think from the beginning, we were like thinking so much about that. Could we build the Render Man of AI? Could we build the first thing that gives like a real artist the ability to use this technology rather than kind of being forced on as an afterthought for like robotics and self-driving car, these models kind of forced on our industry to go, look what we can do. But I think there's a better way. Yeah.
Great. And so speaking of some of the content that you're building, do you want to talk a bit about, George, about your project that you've announced?
Yeah, so one of the things we're doing is self-generating a lot of IP. These filmmakers that we brought into Promise, they don't want to take a job working on someone else's stuff. They have their own ideas, and so we're doing a lot of internal development, and so we have gotten to the point where we've landed on an idea we're particularly excited about. It's a 4-quadrant kids and family animated feature called Tuning In. It's about a young girl who discovers her late father's magical headphones. And she learns that these headphones bring genres of music to life in visual and interesting ways. And so we're in pre-production on that, and we have a great writing team, real human writers, and we're deep into the pipeline. At the same time, in parallel to that, we're building a product to support our pipeline. It's called Muse. A gentleman from the VFX community named Rob Niederhorst is the head of our pipeline. He's worked on John Wick and Last of Us and Spy Kids, and it's just been a really fun collaboration, and that's our first big project, and amongst a slate of a bunch of exciting stuff.
Is Muse something unique to your studio, or is it something that you would offer for other filmmakers as well in the future?
We're still kind of figuring that out. We need to get it to work for us first, and then kind of make that decision.
Eat your own dog food, as they say.
Exactly.
Drink your own champagne, as I prefer to say it.
Yeah.
Of course you would.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Great. So, and then Andrew, we talked a bit about post the Brutalist, you've been exploring AI in some of the projects you're working on now. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been finding and areas that you found it to be more useful, less useful?
Yeah, I mean, after the movie, we then sort of did like a learning tour, probably a little later than you guys, to see like what's out there. I think that a lot of the filmmakers that I'm interested in working with, they're interested in kind of pushing these technologies to where they break. And so it's like, it's not just trying to, make visual effects better, but it's like, okay, well, if in the process of doing it, it's hallucinating, it's, hitting edges, it's falling apart. And so there's a lot of, I think, interest in that and figuring out, and I think actually Bryn, when I met him in the learning tour, there was conversation about like, older models can actually, generate certain things that newer ones can't. And there was this sort of research project company in Barcelona called Synthetic Memories that takes, you feed memories into it and it creates these kind of flawed, hallucinations of the memory. And I think I found those very beautiful because they're flawed, because they're not perfect. And so thinking of really, if you think about every medium has like the things that are considered flaws ultimately become sort of an aesthetic of that medium. And so, it's like the super grainy quality of film or, scratches, all those things become like in some ways fetishized by people over time. And so it's like here, maybe you have the possibility to explore the things that people currently think of as bugs is actually, what's most beautiful or most interesting about this stuff. And so I think, trying to.
And I think that's what is so important about real filmmakers, and the reason why it's important, I think, for anybody who's curious about it, to get involved in it and in this room and others like it, is because like it needs that, right? It's like the reason that the models keep getting like cleaner is because that's what somebody in Silicon Valley is like, these things should be cleaner and like more whatever, like this, it's just like such a race to the bottom of the
super
aesthetic.
Photorealistic and physically accurate.
Yeah, and we were, that was actually like for me when I was going and meeting these guys, like one of the reasons I got so excited and we started with animation at ASTERIA was because I was just like, they don't know how big the uncanny valley actually is, and so this idea of just like, oh, we're gonna make this, you make a movie and it looks like this, and it was like, that's not how it works, like all it takes, you can have the best writer and the best, all it takes is like, it's something to look like AI, with the greatest writer and the greatest director in the entire world, and then it's like, that looks like AI, and you've lost the audience. They don't know that, you know? And so like, that was what was also so obvious, was that they were missing people saying like, what is the aesthetic? Like Natasha and Britt called the movie that they're making the Uncanny Valley, because they were like, we can, if we call it that, it can be as, you know, nasty and crazy and hallucinatory as possible. And then the models kept getting too good, and now it's like, it's lost that part of it. And so we're like, we have to put them back in. But yeah.
Well, I also think a lot of the tool makers and the model providers, they talk about making tools for filmmakers. Yeah. But I think their use case is mostly memes, honestly. And you know, they're all pitching the Hollywood studios, and the studios may or may not engage. You know, there are, you know, companies and creators like the people on this panel who are leveraging those tools or building tools and really trying to push what's possible with them. But when you look at the majority of who the customers are paying, you know, $19.99 a month or whatever to access, you know, Model X, it tends to be a lot of like consumer grade and at best prosumer grade use. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it's a little bit different. And so I think it's great that you guys are doing what you're doing. And some of the tools I think I think you're going to start to see a separation over time, where, you know, the fidelity of the outputs, the resolution, you know, I think models will be specific to different use cases, which we're already finding today. So, you know, it's easy to be like, yeah, this is for filmmakers, but a lot of times I'm like, it's like people making like Donald Trump and Elon Musk memes. Like, is that really like filmmaking?
No, I think
Is it, Barbara? Is it? Is that what you're about to answer?
No, I think
I was just thinking, you know, I spent a good chunk of, not so small chunk of my career trying to get across the Uncanny Valley, and just having, you know, thinking about all the different stops along the way where we knew we couldn't do a fully, you know, digital double human in a hero role for a very long time. So they were like secondary, you know, background characters, or they were apes, or they were glowing blue, or, you know, there's lots of ways that we got around having to have something that was a human performance. But actually what I was thinking about is, you know, not referring to it as a tool so much. Like, and it always kind of bothers, like, is it a tool, isn't it a tool? Is it a set of tools or not a set of tools? It's almost like it's a new medium, right? And you can use that medium to like paint. You could paint a house, or you could paint a masterpiece. You can paint a lot of different things in between, but that it doesn't have to be a house. It can be anything.
Yeah, I think that we always saw that as the opportunity that people were not making, like, and that was also the problem with, I think, the rollout, and that's what so much fear into the industry was, that like when Sora came out and people started to see those videos, they were like, oh my God, Hollywood's over. Look at these movies you're making. And then we were like, those are not movies. Like those aren't films. Like it's a collection of silent vignettes that don't even make much sense.
It had a lot of post-production on them, the ones that people saw.
One of the other, I know that a lot of marketing and music video artists gravitated quickly, and I have a theory about that. You know, a lot of these people make everything. They're producer editors, or they're graphic artists who can also edit and finish their work. And I think it's just going to take a little longer for the long form story people to come over, because they're not used to doing everything themselves, and it's a completely different workflow, because it's about a community moving on.
It's like the Predator.
Yeah, versus a single person. You know, these people that you're finding on Discord.
Yeah, and I think there's like a, you know, also like a difference in the way that we talk about it that's interesting. You know, like famously Jeffrey Katzenberg said, like, it'll make animation, whatever, 90% cheaper. And then James Cameron was like, oh, it's going to be like 50% less. And then Ted Sarandos said it's going to be 10% better, the films, which I think is like the right approach and sort of conversation about it. And I don't think he meant that it's going to be better because it's smarter than us. I just think it means that, like, you might have more time to get things right and have to fix less mistakes afterwards, which is what ends up happening in the industry today. Because there's never enough time, there's never enough money. And I think if you can sort of like take the studios out of the center of those things, if you can be able to make the costs come down to be able to do things that you could do independently, is quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the creation side. Let's talk a bit about, you know, what is you know, you just started to touch on it. What does this afford in terms of business model shift and ownership, and, you know, potential shifts in distribution?
Yeah,
I can speak to that. I think on the distribution side, for the most part, at least the way we're seeing it, is that's not the revolution. The revolution is about the.
You already did that at YouTube.
The internet did that, right? Yeah. And YouTube won, and Netflix won, and over-the-top video, and all the apps and whatever we have, and the individual creators now that we didn't exactly have 20 years ago. So that's exciting and fun. And so to me, that was the democratization of distribution. That battle has been fought and for the most part won. This is the democratization of creation. And so how the stuff is made, whether you're making it entirely in generative AI models or as a substitute for your VFX shot or in more of a hybrid way, there's myriad ways to do it. But it's a new way to make things. So for Promise, we have this North Star of the highest quality, most compelling stories we can make that belong on a silver screen or on a streamer, not as like on the shelf of AI movies. I completely agree with what Bryn said. No one's asking for AI movies, right? People want to be moved. They want to laugh and fall in love with characters and be entertained, and that is the goal. So I don't think for us the distribution side of it is that different. However, I do think that I think this is going to be the most exciting time in Hollywood, and it hasn't started yet, but it's going to start in 3 to 5 years because small pods of creatives, a producer that's probably in this room, a generative AI filmmaker who probably took a course at Curious Refuge, and a great. It sounds like a pitch. It's just like a fact. And a great writer who hasn't been able to have something made in the last 10 years.
Who also might be in this room.
They're going to get together and they're going to make something incredible, and it's going to have a high impact. And those groups are going to own their work. They're going to control where their work is seen, and they're going to be empowered. And I think that's going to be I honestly think that'll be a new golden age for Hollywood. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm also very excited about that. And I agree. I think distribution for us is strong enough right now to build something revolutionary on the production side. I think about it, that democratization with YouTube all the time, which was like YouTube democratized distribution. You didn't need a studio to distribute anymore. My career as a documentarian was literally only possible because the Canon 5D came out. I was never able to make a movie that looked as good as a movie on the big screen. But when that camera came out, I could make my movies, and nominated for my first Oscar with shooting on a GoPro and a cell phone with an iPhone with a lens on cinema lens. And to me, that was the democratization of indie film and documentary. You had a whole new group of people who were able to make those movies, like myself. And I think what we see is this democratization. We talk about it as the democratization of studio level productions, for the first time to be able to make things that right now you can only make at a studio, to be able to do with those small pods. And that doesn't mean that we don't need everybody in this room. I think that people who are passionate and they have the skills and they want to create have more opportunities. I just got back from Senegal where I was with this kid, Hussein Dembelso, who's a 37-year-old filmmaker who's making the best films using AI right now in the entire world. And he's one guy, and he's making these movies, putting them up on YouTube. They're going viral. They're calling him the Spielberg of Africa, and he's just one guy. And so I was just there yesterday. I went out to see him. We made a movie together. That guy's been wanting to make movies his whole life, and for him, it's he's doing it, and he's just beginning. But I think that story is going to happen a lot more all over the world.
Yeah, I also think that as pricing comes down, I mean, in a very different way, we saw this with the Brutalist, which was really a different form of production innovation. But as pricing comes down, the risk of storytelling can go up, right? You want to, Brady had an amazing film he wanted to make, and no one wanted to give us $30 million to make it. But at 10 you could, and then we could have a 3.5 hour long period film about brutalist architecture now, and it was a viable economic product for distributors. It was viable for the people who invested in it. And so I think if costs come down, ideally creative ambition, conceptual ambition, storytelling risk can go up, because if you're spending $70 million on a movie, it needs to check a bunch of boxes, because otherwise you're going to maybe lose a lot of money. If you're spending $4 million on it, well, maybe there's a lot more risk that studios or financiers or other people might take. So I think that's maybe the hope, is that it unlocks a new era of like risk taking, which would be exciting.
So in this room, we have a lot of amazing producers. We have people probably at very different places on the journey into learning about AI and experimenting with AI. What would you, what advice, George, I think I know what yours is going to be. Here's something I'm just curious.
Hey, we got a discount code. Did I mention the discount code?
But in general, what would to help people move along the journey, what would each of you, where would you have them start? Or what would the next step be?
I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room has a project or a package that they haven't been able to make. And some, not all of those projects, but some of those projects might make sense in this new medium. And so there are groups like, that are ready to make those things. And so I think it's actually a really interesting time particularly to be an independent producer, because you can form one of those pods I was talking about, and you could potentially make it yourself. Or if you need a bit of money and a bit of technical expertise and, business affairs support and, all the things that come with it, those projects have a greater chance of being made now because, if they're costing single-digit millions to make or hundreds of thousands in some cases, there's a new avenue for those things to be brought to life. And so that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, I would say have an open mind to it, but also no need to go into it blindly. Like I think it's very important, and we're going to start trying to work much closer with all the guilds, because our belief is that any movie that we're making in the future is going to be by the standards of this room. That's what we want. And so for us, it's like I think it's really important for people to be aware of what is dangerous and then what is good. But you should come by and see us. And we were talking about it too. Like we love showing people around.
It's great. I went this week, so everyone.
Yeah, I mean, please. I mean, maybe we could organize it officially. But I think it's exciting to see it and feel it. That was what was really important. We're in an old 1916 silent movie soundstage that Mabel Norman built in Silver Lake. And part of that is being in a space that also reminds us that our industry has gone through a lot of changes before, and we've come out the other end, and we've come out stronger. And so I think we're optimistic, but also going into it, I think, as thoughtful as we can be.
Yes, and do go and visit him. There's a speakeasy down in the basement that's a must see.
Ben will pour you a drink. Ben, everybody.
I think just adding on to the getting education about it, reviewing your projects, things you thought you maybe couldn't make but could be possible, thinking it with this lens. And then the other thing that came to mind is that I know we often focus on the generative image and generative video side of AI, but it's like throughout everything, right? So you can imagine everything from how you sort of collaborate in your thinking, in your ideation, how you break down a script, how you run regression models on your previous line budgets. I mean, there's just an amazing amount of places that this, post-production and whether it's using Respeecher to do dubbing or you're doing languages, different language translations. I've seen really incredible progress on keyframing color grading, and then running that for continuity across sequences. So there's just many places where it might actually impact how you're thinking about the cost of things that you're trying to create. And so I would just say to use the widest lens.
I would just to add to that really quickly, I think that's a really important point. I think it'll be in every part of our workflow in the next 3 to 5 years, like every part of it, in the same way that the same way like a computer or the internet is, where it's like you couldn't even imagine it would be hard to make a movie without using a computer or the internet now. Like that's going to be how AI is. I mean, our belief is that with all of our projects, every project that we're doing has its own model that we build when we start a production, and that model goes throughout as like an agentic helper. And I think that that's probably the way that it's going to go, is that, yeah, it'll be like every movie we're making just has like a smart Google Drive that has a little Siri built into it. And that's what we're building. But like that will be your partner in making stuff, and it will be that inevitable in it. And soon, I say 3 to 5 years. Barbara says 2, but we'll meet.
We'll meet in 2 and see where we are, or 3.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, as someone who, sits in the, like, we're trying to, make great movies, and it doesn't have as much of like building a tech, platform behind everything. I think it's, I found that reaching out to people and just asking them questions, everyone's incredibly open right now, because it feels like a period of time where everyone's trying to figure it out, like what can be done. And so I would say every cold email I've sent trying to figure out, like, hey, what are you working on? Like 100% of them, people respond, they engage. And I think the only way you're gonna find like what's new here is by experimenting with it, by talking to people about it. And I think that's an exciting, that's very exciting. So who knows where it'll go, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really great.